Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hi there, Raj.
Hey, Timothy. Greetings from warm and sunny and balmy Boston.
Warm and sunny and balmy Boston. Put
Well,
those
it is sunny.
phrases
I'll give
together
it
in
that.
February.
It is sunny, but yeah, we're dealing with piles of stuff.
Yeah, a little bit of white stuff hanging around, isn't there? All right. So today, we are really fortunate to have a wonderful guest. We have today Rebecca Henderson. She is the John and Natty MacArthur University professor at Harvard University. She's one of 25 university professors at Harvard, and that's their highest faculty honor. She's also a research fellow at NBER, formerly on the board of directors at Amgen IDEX Labs, and the author of a wonderful book that we're going to delve into today called Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire, and the thinking that she is doing since then about what some of the implications of that book are. So, Rebecca, welcome to our show.
Timothy, Raj, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, let's begin with reimagining capitalism in a world on fire. Let's unpack that just to begin. Are you a capitalist?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, good. So we got that out of the way. Now, reimagining capitalism. I mean, one of the things that your book makes a very good point of, and your research makes a very good point of, is that we know that multi-stakeholder businesses and purpose-driven businesses tend to outperform their peers. Now, you've done a lot of work in researching that. And what I find still fascinating is that despite the research, we seem to have a hard time persuading people that this is just a better way of doing business. And I want to jump in right there and sort of say, with all your research and the evidence that you provide, what's going on that we still have to have these discussions about the fact that multi-stakeholder and purpose-driven businesses need to somehow justify their existence?
Timothy, it's a great question, and I think there are two kinds of answers. One answer looks at the strength of the research, and I actually disagree with you. And, I personally think that if you run a purpose-driven company, you will see higher levels of productivity, of commitment, of intrinsic motivation, of strategic alignment, high levels of trust. I think these are higher performing organizations. But I think the reason it's not obviously a slam dunk, do this and you're going to get rich, is because, and you both, I think, know this very well, which is being a purpose-driven organization is hard work. It's hard emotional work, and it requires real focus on strategic decision-making in the following sense. If I just stand up in front of my workforce and say, I'm going to be purpose-driven because I understand it will raise return on assets, so let's just do it, nothing will happen, right? Being purpose-driven, really leading from a place of meaning and wisdom, really focusing on human flourishing in every decision you make as a business, that requires shifting the operating system and shifting the human system as well. So it's important to rearrange work so that you distribute power down. Really becoming a purpose-driven organization requires both real investments in the business and real investments in the human system. So why is that? Because you don't get benefits by simply putting up a nice mission statement. You have to make sure the strategy of the business is aligned with the deep purpose of the organization. And that the organization is structured to support the dignity and flourishing of every employee. That power is driven down through the organization so you can mobilize those excited, meaning-driven employees and they can make great decisions. And redoing the operating model, that's a ton of work. If you think about Zeynep Ton's research at MIT, it typically takes a company at least a year, maybe 2 or 3, to structure the organization to take advantage of a passionate, engaged, in-touch workforce. And that takes time and investment. And then the other thing is you have to act as if you mean it. You have to treat everyone with dignity and respect. You have to decentralize power. And that is difficult for many senior managers. I manage a very small team, and I think it's sometimes difficult for me. You know, the temptation just to say, do what I say because I know what I'm doing is very high. And to do the inner work necessary to allow people to make their own mistakes, to respond to them as a human being rather than as an employee, that's not easy either. So I do think these kinds of organizations are the future of business for all kinds of reasons. But I don't think it's as simple as saying, you'll get rich, just make the switch.
Raj, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to ask Rebecca about what she's written some very interesting things also around the question of democratic erosion as well, in addition to her work on the stakeholder model and about reimagining capitalism. So I think, Rebecca, you've talked about how climate change and inequality and democratic erosion, these are not side effects, but these are some of the outcomes of this singular focus on shareholder primacy. What are some of the most important levers, do you think, for shifting that? You know, how do we get people to get out of that, and where does this democratic idea fit into that?
So the first lever is a strong, democratically responsible state. So if we are to stop democratic erosion, we have to begin to...
That's all right.
Such a big question. Okay. So how do we stop democratic erosion? There are some simple fixes, simple in the sense that I can list them off. They are not simple to do. Get money out of politics. At the moment, we're running a system where people who have considerable financial resources can pump it into the political system. We're seeing it most clearly recently in the case of cryptocurrency and AI, where the threat of regulation of those industries, which in my view is amply warranted in both cases, has been beaten back, at least partly by billions of dollars being poured into the political process. So we're in the midst of a system where apparently the rich can buy the rules. And if the rich can buy the rules, it's not a democracy. It's a plutocracy or an oligarchy. And so, as I said, it's simple to say. Actually reversing those rules and enacting them requires very significant political change. The good news is there's increasingly bipartisan support for this. I have a friend who leads an NGO that is trying to pass a constitutional amendment to really shift the rules around money in politics. He's getting a lot of traction on the ground in both blue and red states. But, you know, we only have 13 amendments or 21 amendments or whatever it is for a reason. They are super hard to push. And Citizens United, that founding block of that finding by the Supreme Court that said money is speech. And I think about this. I think of myself standing on a street. You know, here I am. I'm saying, well, you know, I'm really a bit uncomfortable about AI and the effects it's having on my kids. And everywhere on the street, there are loudspeakers and in every cell phone and every movie and like, AI is great. And, you know, so it's not right? It's not a democracy if individual voices can't be heard and don't count. And of course, as you know, social media and the polarization of information is playing into that. So I only ever see people who agree with me. I even come to believe that the other people I'm living with are not human or are evil, rather than in a working democracy. And this is the beauty of a working democracy. If you're a big business and you can give an infinite amount and the politician knows that, they're like, you want my vote? I need the money. And so, many businesses are busy giving contributions to everyone on both sides of the aisle, further fueling a deeply corrupt system. So business could model being a corporate citizen. One particularly interesting example, I think, is at the community level, where communities are beginning to realize that the kind of tension and polarization we're seeing is really inimical to the long-term climate of business as well as everyone else. And so business leaders and labor leaders and the big hospitals and the big universities and the mayor and, and the schools, let's get everyone around the table and thinking about this together. And that's the hard work that needs to be done at the grassroots to rebuild the democracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there. And I think the connection between this crony capitalism that you're describing and sort of the profit-centered view only of business, I think is pretty strong, right? Because if you have a broader stakeholder perspective where society is a stakeholder, then as a corporate citizen, you're going to act differently than what we've been seeing. I think what's been revealed in the last few years is sort of the absence of moral courage and moral leadership on the part of many, many institutions, including business and society.
Well, I completely agree, Raj. And that's why, if you were to say to me, what should someone who wants to be a purpose-driven leader do? I would start with individual cultivation of your deepest core. That is, who are you? Most people know at the deepest level that money is just a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And that at some level you can get more and more money and more power. But if those around you are not suffering, if those around you are not thriving, if you don't have deep human connections, if you're not proud of what you're doing, what kind of life is that? And so for me, it can sound fantastical, except I've been in so many rooms where people light up when I say, this is no way to live. Focusing on money as the be-all and end-all of everything is a disaster for you as well as everyone else. And, if we could recover some of the spirit we had in, whoa, this is tricky, but think about the 50s when we thought about the goal of the company being the flourishing of the society. In many ways, as I'm sure both of you know and have said often on this podcast, it was a stakeholder-driven regime. Now, there were some issues, serious racism, terrible misogyny. So it's not that I want to go back to the 50s, but it is possible to run a firm in a way that generates lots of money as a means to an end, but not an end in itself, but flourishing and excitement. I was talking to a purpose-driven business person called James Ree. Do you know him? He wrote a book called
He's been at our events. Yeah.
And I loved the fact that one of James Ree's metric of success was the number of employees having children.
Yeah.
Because, one of the symbols of our despair is people saying, well, what kind of world am I bringing children into? So he built a firm where people were so excited about what their life was and who they were, that they were having lots of kids.
It's as simple as that at some level, right? The future has to be an exciting place. And we've kind of stolen the future in many ways from our kids. And can't imagine the next century, forget about the next millennium, the way we're going.
But Raj, I listen to this, and then where I find myself going is, but wait, we have the technology and the capacity to build an incredible world. I recently, in a class I'm teaching, asked the students to write me 500 words on what life could be. And I got back these beautiful descriptions where, food is locally grown and we live in housing which is designed to foster interaction, and the machines have been banished to the periphery where the robots are busy making the stuff, but we have time to dance and make music and play football and, all the things we want to do. And this is not some kind of crazy utopia. If you say, of course, there's going to be conflict and strife and difficulties, there always is. But humans have lived like that before. It's striking that happiness levels in the US are, depending on what source you look at, not that much higher than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're much richer, things. But if we could reorient and rebuild and rewild, think of the earth as our garden and us as gardeners. It was incredible. And imagine a world which said, the thing we're most focused on is our children's well-being. no child goes to bed hungry. In school, we not only give them the skills they need, but we give them the skills to understand themselves, to emotionally self-regulate, to know how to interact with the technology. We give them the skills to relate to their friends. I mean, the kids are not making love anymore.
Yeah. So
this is not good, but we could imagine. So Raj, I completely agree with you. The image of humanity as an asteroid, like just destroying everything. But we will not be able to build a better future unless we can imagine it, talk about it, play with it. The barrier is not our capacity. It's human imagination and will that's standing in the way of that world. And it brings us back to purpose-driven firms. It's so easy to manage a firm as if people were things, and the goal was just to raise the numbers at the end of the quarter. But it's so much more rewarding and more engaging to manage as if people were people. Annoying, spiky, loving, crazy, wild, resourceful. That's just that's like living life in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
And, all 3 of us have been in businesses where that is happening. And no one wants to turn off their brain in those places.
Yeah.
That's often the best, one of the best parts of the day.
Well, it's fascinating because there's so many places to go with this. But, what I've heard us talk about so far is there's sort of a systemic level. Let's look at the systemic system that we're in. We've also spoken about the fact that there are individual businesses, and within those individual businesses, there are individual leaders. And that gets back to the whole question of it begins at one level with the individual and their development, because a business can't be more conscious than the level of consciousness of the leadership. And then that leads to a whole question of trying to have a discussion at the systemic level with somebody who begins with it's about a thriving humanity versus somebody else who's sort of saying, let's be pragmatic and realpolitik, and it's all about beating the Chinese. So that's a lot of territory that we cover. And so I'm looking to, I want to speak to my son and daughter, a 29-year-old and a 26-year-old. And I sort of say, let's give them some hope, Rebecca. I'm like, where do we start this dialogue? Where's the leverage point that we can begin to start working on these things where you think we can start to help prepare the next generation to be having this dialogue that we've started here?
I think we can build organizations, not just business firms, but schools, nonprofits, bureaucracies that embody what James Reed calls kindness and math. So organizations that are kind, that treat people well, that allow them to do work that is meaningful. We have many, many examples of what that looks like. We know how to do that. And one of the things we know is they also have to be based on math. So to believe that you're focused on human flourishing is not to throw pragmatism out the window. It makes good management more important. It means you have to make careful strategic decisions. You need to use the right metrics. You need to run businesses really well. So this is not an excuse for sloppy kumbaya, not making the right decisions, not holding people to account. The core capacity that enables this combination of kindness and math is the ability to disagree politely and respectfully at the micro level as at the democracy level. It's the ability to say, Timothy, I think your suggestion that we only produce pink flower pots is really not a good one. Rather than, this is an idiotic idea reflective of your basic failings as a human being, or simply shutting you down. The core capacity is this ability to be in relationship and stay in relationship. It's sustained by kindness, but it's also sustained by actually getting things done. This is the thing, is if we trust each other, and I did many years of research on the relationship between trust, organizational performance, And I find that relationship really compelling. If we trust each other, then we can do amazing things. If you don't trust people, you have to specify, turn the widget 3 centimeters to the right. You don't give people any freedom of choice or responsiveness. Trust is the key. And so we can build those kinds of firms, organizations, schools, government bureaucracies. They're like a light in the darkness. Because who would not want to work for one of those? And that seems to me the pragmatic pathway, is we'll get to trade with China. Let's take it slow. Let's, do the right thing. But we'll get to it practicing these capacities at the local level and using that to build the larger society that we want.
Beautiful.
Rebecca, I'd like to change the direction a little bit as a fellow academic. And you have been an exemplary academic by every measure, and you are now at the very pinnacle of that trajectory of where you can go in the academic world. And so I want to explore your journey a little bit, because there are a lot of academics, of course, out there who listen to this, but also I think the world of academia seems to me to be somewhat devoid of purpose, at least in the business schools, in my experience. People don't have a purpose beyond publication maximization, just like companies are focused on profit maximization. So I want to go back to your beginning. So you started your academic life as a mechanical engineer, somewhat surprisingly, I suppose, for our listeners. But what made you shift from mechanical engineering into the study of organizations and ultimately of capitalism and systemic change? Like, was there a turning point when you said, I would rather focus on those issues and not on mechanical engineering?
And so I got super interested in why firms have trouble changing, why so many firms are badly run. And that's what got me into the work in trust and into the work in purpose. And then energy companies started showing up in my office saying, we need to do an energy transition. I got very interested in climate change. And I can't tell you why more of our colleagues don't have this reaction, Raj. But once I saw the science, I was like, oh dear, drop everything and focus. Every nerve, everything I know, what can I bring to this problem? Because it threatens the life of our children. To leave our kids a world which is so much more depleted, so much more at risk, just seems to me deeply immoral. So I helped start the first course on sustainable strategy at MIT and got recruited at Harvard to found their environment and business center. I don't know, Raj, why so many of our colleagues continue to turn out, papers in their discipline, and I don't know the story they're telling themselves. I think part of it might be nothing I can do can really make a difference, or someone else will do it, or the technology will fix it. And one of my hopes for this moment, this incredibly difficult moment of disjunction and rupture, is that more people will see, we have to do something. We have to move. And so I haven't given up on our colleagues. I really haven't. There's so many smart, thoughtful people in academia.
The intellectual horsepower.
There's so much intelligence there. There's so much intellectual horsepower. I haven't given up on our society. If we focus on these issues, no kid goes to bed hungry. Let's clean up the world so that it's a beautiful, flourishing place, stays to be a beautiful, flourishing place. We can do it. And the excitement of doing that, the purpose of doing that. I mean, imagine mobilizing young people and helping them see that it could be done. I mean, wow. Wow.
Well, I love that you're bringing in the neoclassical economics, because, it's fascinating to me, because the discussion we're having is sort of saying, listen, isn't the end goal human flourishing? And yet we have an economic model that's built on some 19th century assumptions that we know are just not true. Where we ended up with profit maximization, where we ended up with it's all about zero-sum game thinking and etc. We know more from a scientific point of view today about human flourishing, about what makes people happy, about how we build trust, etc. Scientifically, we know that. We didn't know that 150 years ago. But we have an economic system that has its originations in these dark ages in some sense from a scientific point of view. But we haven't updated our thinking. We haven't updated our systems based on the better understanding we have about what works and what doesn't. And that, to me, I find fascinating, that, we're on this trajectory. We can sit here and say, we know it's screwed, and we know the founding assumptions are wrong, but no, let's not change it.
Well, again, Timothy, I love where you're coming from, but I think it's important to remember why we put the old system in place. Like, we had a really good reason to do that. This explosion of creativity, of innovation, of productivity. Completely. Because I've written this book, I sometimes talk to people who say, well, let's just throw capitalism out the window. Not a good idea. Let's modify it. And I think, Timothy, I completely agree that we now much better understand that humans are as cooperative as they are competitive. In fact, that the species' ability to cooperate is a superpower. And that's what we need to activate right now. And that this is an old idea, which is you need to make sure that business people don't have an incentive to drive wages to the bottom, to treat people badly, to throw their waste out the window. It needs to be in balance. But I think this is an exciting time. I mean, we could use the technology.
Well, listen, our angle on this, just to be really clear, is we want to celebrate and elevate capitalism. So we want to celebrate because we are capitalists. It's conscious capitalism. So we're capitalists. We really strongly believe that market-driven forces and the amazing evolution that we've had, exactly as you describe, is true. And we want to elevate the practice, and we want to elevate the practice of capitalism. So elevating the practice.
There are many different kinds of capitalism. You can run a firm that buys the waters of England and pumps raw sewage into the rivers, and you can make a ton of money. So they're maximizing profits, but that's not the capitalism I believe in. You can run a firm that buys a hospital and fires a certain percentage of the nurses and knows how many more people will die because you do that. But that's not the capitalism we're celebrating, right? And I think you're pointing to, at least I think there are two major levers. One is elevating the practice. Absolutely. What kind of person would cut the number of nurses knowing people would die? So really celebrating what it means to be committed, responsible, engaged with human flourishing. But also, we need to change the rules. The guys that were put on the rivers of England, they should have had very clear rules on not putting the sewage into the rivers.
And then some of them are going around saying they're very purpose-driven companies. We won't name one particular water company who is supposed to be an icon of purpose in the UK. And it's like, what? You're also the highest fined company for... Anyway, holding that aside, that sounds to me like an externality problem. I mean, to me, the issue is the pricing of externalities. And, as Raj is fond of saying, there's no side effects. There's only effects.
Right. Yes. And we know much more about the side effects, much more about the effects than we did, including the effects on human beings. And we know much more about what supports human flourishing. So yes, it's capitalism in service to the society. The incredible engine, I'm sure it's like having a tiger, right? You want to have the tiger on a leash. And the leash is both in our hearts and minds and a regulatory leash. Because regulation alone, if it's not in our hearts and minds, it's going to be the wrong regulation and it won't work. or the wrong kind of control. So it's this interaction between who we are and what we believe and the kind of society we build that holds capitalism in its rightful place, which is generating the innovation and creativity and excitement of growth, but not so much that it trespasses on the society.
Now, Rebecca, you've been deeply engaged with the world of practice, unlike many academics, I would say, who are somewhat in the ivory tower. And that includes serving on boards of some very significant companies for extended periods of time. Could you talk about two things? So what did you learn in serving on those boards that informed your work as an academic? And on the other side, in what ways do you feel you were able to influence them or change the trajectory of those companies and broaden their thinking beyond the shareholder-centric model?
So my board service was fundamental to my thinking. I was very fortunate in that I was on two boards of very purpose-driven, very innovative, successful companies. And in many ways, that's easier than in being on many other boards. But both companies were in the medical field, one in pet medicine and the other in human medicine. And one of the things I learned is you have more choices than you think you do. That in many ways saying, well, I have to do this because I have to satisfy the investors and it's a short-term profit, is actually laziness. And that is something I believe very strongly, which is people use, I have to do the short-term hard thing as a crutch. And they avoid making the difficult investments and building the consensus required to really take the firm to a different place. And when we talk about elevating the practice of management, Timothy, when you talk about that, that to me is central. Teaching people to focus on the longer term, on the broader picture, everything that effective stakeholder management requires you to do, because so often it's a shortcut. And, firing those nurses is going to destroy morale in the hospital. It's going to destroy the social support on which you're licensed to operate in that community rests. These short-term decisions, they come home. Now, of course, you may walk away with, hundreds of millions of dollars in the meantime. We could talk about that. But I learned there's more wiggle room than you think. And one of these firms, when I joined it, it was a small $100 million company in Portland, Maine that nobody had ever heard of. And the CEO had a long-term strategy about value for the customer. Like, this is a company, it's pet medicine. We really care about the cats and dogs, which may sound ridiculous, but for many people, their cat or dog is a major emotional support, a central part of their families. They're a member of the family. So we were doing diagnostic equipment. The CEO had a vision of tying all these instruments together to really do much better medicine. In some ways, vet medicine now is better than human medicine because of the kinds of advances that came out of firms like IDEXX. And that was driven from this passion for the customer and the furry people, And so I saw it working. I saw it in action. And I saw that you could make those choices. I also saw that those choices are not always easy. And Raj, you asked what I contributed to the board. I won the Financial Times Director of the Year award one year, which was an incredible honor. And I met a couple of people from the selection committee and I said, why me? I mean, I know there are amazing directors out there that, much more glittering CVs than I do. And the woman who led the committee looked at me and said, because you changed out the board. So I was on the board for 17 years. I was chair of the governance committee. We went from 200 million to 3 billion, from a share price of 30 to a 600 or 700, and it had split. And you can't have the same board that you had at the beginning that you have at the end. And I looked at her and I said, well, doesn't everyone do that? And she said, no.
Yeah.
And so what I think I contributed is, I taught kindness and we need to center our inner wisdom. But I'm like a aggressive strategy professor. And I like to get things done. So I'm really deep on the math. This is why I say kindness and math. I'm like, all the talk in the world won't get you there if you don't have the right people and you're not focused in the right place. And so, on the other company, I was, on the compliance committee, and I was like, okay, this could kill the company. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? People would say of me, Rebecca, you ask refreshingly candid questions. Which, as you know, is a super mixed.
Yeah.
But no, Raj, I like to think, I mean, I have a heart. I really have a big heart. But I don't think that's an excuse to not think super carefully with your brain.
You need to be tough-minded and
it's all about being a great
as Martin
man.
Luther King said, be tough-minded and tender-hearted at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you're often missing...
Exactly. And love and power. You got to be able to integrate power and love.
Well, I want to pull on one string because you mentioned something that always fascinates me. When you're taking a multi-stakeholder approach, what we call stakeholder orientation, we say one of the critical things is having a win-win mindset. Now, my friend John Mackey said very clearly at some point, he says, it's easy to take a win-lose mindset. That's the shortcut. It takes creativity, it takes time, it takes energy and patience and leadership to really say, how can we create a win-win opportunity here? And that shift in mindset from, I could make a short-term win-lose thing, or we can really look and try to bring in human creativity. We can try to look at it from different angles. That takes work, that takes time, that takes effort. And yet, we know it's likely to create longer-term value than the short-term win-lose mentality. And I'm curious, as a professor in a business school who's trying to educate people on how to do this, or even on the board, how do you engage people in that dialogue that says, don't be a lazy SOB, do the hard work, get it done, versus not?
That's why I think the inner work is so important. Taking the time to learn to center in your own personal deep values, to touch into that source of inner wisdom and commitment that all of us have, and then to begin to build that in the group. Because it's very different to move from this purely analytic, how do I make the numbers add up, although that's an important perspective. But one of the things that the deep centering can do, and, the neuroscience is very, very complicated. But if we can essentially access the more intuitive, relational, long-term parts of our minds, and we know they're different systems in the brain, if we can come down off that adrenaline-fueled high, and the trouble with the adrenaline-fueled high, do it, is, and Raj has written beautifully about this, it collapses to that dark, numb yourself, take the shortcut, shut down. What we're shooting for is that intermediate, that sense of life, vivacity, possibility, creativity, so what any good design firm would tell you, right? And that's what we need to do as we elevate management practice, is bring that side of ourselves, that playfulness, that it's not win-lose. It's like, of course it's about the win-win. We'll get to a much better solution if you're winning and I'm winning, and let's think about that together. That's a completely different way in than, okay, let's cut costs again.
You raised it earlier,
it's
right?
Just a whole different...
You said it's relational, right?
Yeah.
This is about relational versus transactional. And when you're into a relational mindset...
Yes.
And I want to pull on that one more time, which is, you just made a good case for the individual development to be in a place where you can have that mindset. And you talked about trust and all your work in how trust leads to innovation, which leads to performance. And I want to say we need to double down on that in an era of AI, because in an era where fear, uncertainty, and doubt is occurring, be it geopolitically or different business models or the threats of AI, the organizations that are going to win are the organizations that develop high levels of trust, because they can innovate, they can take risks, they can take... So to me, trust and engagement and psychological safety is the new competitive advantage. And everybody is over here right now saying it's all about AI and technology. And I think we're over here saying, yes, and it's also about trust and engagement and psychological safety, because you're not going to get the innovation. You're not going to get the experimentation that you need to be successful.
I'm so glad you're saying that. I mean, I don't know if you noticed there was an item in one of the national papers this morning about how much more China is deploying AI into their factories. And I think that winning with AI means making AI a partner and a companion and a complement to human labor. And the easy, quick thing to do is just replace. Take the existing thing and replace. And it's going to be the partnership between the machine and the humans amongst themselves that's going to build the kind of world we want to live in. Because, so I just like, yes, yes, yes. This moving in this direction is no longer optional. It's now absolutely mandatory. If you want to build a successful business, because all the things we talked about, innovation, trust, flexibility, as you try and introduce AI into your firm, you really need these skills. And if people think AI is just a way to replace them and cut them down and you treat them like things, you're not going to get to where you want to go.
So Rebecca, turning to your teaching now, you've taught a bunch of innovative courses. Reimagining Capitalism, of course, became a mainstay in the Harvard curriculum for a lot of students. What are you learning from your students? What are you hearing from your students in addition to what are you teaching them? And do students ever cry in your class? Because I've had that experience. It's very moving.
Only twice so far this semester.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. We're only in February.
I'm not sure I want it as a metric, though. What am I learning from the students? I am learning that we have no time. That beginning to give young people a sense of what we could build and their role in it in a plausible way is a matter of urgency. That doing the human work to support them now. And how do we do that? We do that by being concrete, because the students are super smart. Hand waving does not cut it. So I've taken two approaches. One is all this inner work, inner development stuff. This is not blah, blah, blah. This is stuff that humans have been doing for thousands of years. We have well-developed techniques, both spiritual and religious and secular, to help you access that part of yourself you are shutting down and running away from, and you will feel much better when you learn to do that. So very concretely, like the whole society is got caught in this kind of frenzy collapse, and there are skills that can get you into that intermediate place. Have a colleague who calls it super self-regulators. You can be balanced and joyful, connected to the people around you, and a dynamite leader. In fact, you're going to be a better leader. And really supporting the students in developing that. And I'm learning, oh my goodness, they need it. They want it. They love it. And at the same time, they're like, okay, all right, we'll work on ourselves, but how does that help anything more? And so what I'm learning is concrete examples, things you can do. And then I also do a lot of macro systemic change work, suggesting that that's what's always driven change. Change always comes from local experiments. Positive change nearly always comes from a commitment to the whole and a passion about where the society can go. And so I'm trying to give them a framework that makes sense of what they can do with their lives. And I mean, Raj has known this for years. It's new to me. I'm connecting to the students in a way I've not really ever done before. I have so much admiration for them. They are so smart. They so much want to make a difference. And they're all over. Yeah, you could, the MBAs are all over. You can use capitalism to do it. Some of the others have other paths, education, healing, and so on. But yes, they are afraid to be hopeful. but they want to see what could be possible. And it's extraordinary.
So
yeah.
You've been on many silent retreats over the years, I believe. So talk about that, and why is that important, and what do you gain from that? And do you recommend that for leaders? And then also I want you to talk about the new course that you came back, and I think from a sabbatical, and you created this whole new thing. I want you to talk about that as well, because you're going much deeper and much more personal now in your work with students.
So why do I spend time on silent retreat? There was enormous interest, and I finally reached all these people. And I was in these rooms with people who control a lot of money and people running these enormous companies in Korea and Japan and South America and Europe and the States. I mean, it was like, wow. And then I realized that in general, and of course there were some extraordinary exceptions, but in general, people were using my talk as a way to make themselves feel better. That somehow talking about how things could be better was operating instead of action. They would lean back and they'd say, well, very interesting, Professor Henderson, very, very interesting. We'll get back to you. And I had written a book laying out the business case for making change, which I completely believe. I think it's completely robust. We have the technologies, we have the policies, we can run our businesses this way. It's absolutely possible. And I had forgotten my own research, which was that companies only change when they're passionate about the change, when they're emotionally committed to making a difference. I spent 20 years looking at trust and commitment and how organizations do fundamental change. And I'd forgotten that what it takes is the deep emotional work to want to make the change. And so I got very depressed because I thought, okay, we're not going to do this. We're just going to, that classic cartoon, we're going to maximize shareholder value and burn the world and burn our kids. And I got very, very sad. And I still find this funny. I thought, okay, the only way through this is something that looks like a consciousness shift or spiritual revival. How weird is that? Like a mass consciousness shift? And then I thought, well, I don't have any better ideas. I mean, that's what we need. We need people to realize who they are as humans, what their moral responsibilities are, and what it means to lead a rich and deeply engaged life. The stuff that humans have been talking about for thousands of years. So I went on retreat, both to be able to hold what was happening and look at it clearly. So for me, that's one of the first benefits of doing this kind of work. Is if you don't have a still place, a joyful place, it's very hard to really look at what's happening and so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and just try to do things right now. But and silent retreat is not for everyone. My husband thinks it's weird. He could not imagine a week on retreat, not reading a book or talking to anyone. And there are many other paths. Different people, you can use Tai Chi, you can use sitting in circle, you can use art, you can use opening yourself to awe. There are all kinds of techniques to connect to this deep place inside of us. I used Buddhist retreat because, hey, and I will say it's been extraordinary. For me, it's been enormously helpful. My relationships to my partner, to others in my life, I no longer walk around with that constant state of dread. I can, of course, get kicked into it, but I don't have to stay there. I have the tools such that I don't have to stay there. I am so aware. God, I sound like a greeting card. I'm so aware of the beauty and gift of life. Like, oh my God, but watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to move my fingers. How did I do that? How did I do that? So really just the excitement about being alive and what can be done and that sense of possibility. So that's what retreat did for me. To your question about the two courses, the first course was like, okay, we're going to be businesslike and we're going to show you how to save the world with these 5 steps. And I'm proud of the book, proud of my research, but it was all cognitive. It was all heady. I'd say purpose is really important, but I didn't really talk about what it means to be rooted in your deepest values. I didn't really get that. And so the new course is an attempt to go back over the old ground, like we really can fix the world, not fix, but we can reverse
heal
and
it,
hold a lot of the damage in place. We can build a good
Yeah.
society. But you do need to do all this messy emotional work, which I must say, Raj, I'm finding hard to teach. It was much easier when I just said, okay, here are the 5 pillars of strategy. Here's how to maximize shareholder value. That was easy. This is much harder, more intricate, more rewarding work.
What is the course called again? Just tell our listeners a little bit about that.
The course is called Reweaving Ourselves.
Yeah, we're kind of fragmented and bringing
Reweaving.
us back together.
We are fragmented, and it's reweaving us, me, reweaving myself, bringing together the head and the heart, bringing together work and home so that I don't have 2 moral systems in the two. So it's reweaving myself, but also reweaving ourselves, because I do think we need to reweave the space between us and the natural world. We've been treating the natural world as if it was an inexhaustible supply of stuff for us. And it's a living web that is absolutely essential to our survival. It's our support system, our life support system on this tiny planet. And we're kind of pulling the cables out of the walls to continue the spaceship.
Well, let me ask a hard question here, because you're at Harvard Business School, arguably one of the best business schools in the world, most prestigious. And coming out of Harvard Business School, people are going into Wall Street. They're going into consulting firms, right? These are still as I understand it, still the areas where the vast majority of the best students are often headed. Maybe increasingly there's some going into entrepreneurial things in some ways. But I wonder what's shifting, or what needs to shift if one of the premier business schools is putting out people who are going into the system. You know, I went to a large consulting firm. You went to a large consulting firm. You know, that's the system.
Timothy, you're asking a deep question about levers for change. To use something called the 3 horizon model, there are 3 things to work on. We can work on patching up what we have now, just stopping the leaks. That's horizon 1. We could work on horizon 3, which is imagining a kind of complete reboot and what that would look like and how we would do that. And that's important work, and that's often the work of entrepreneurs. But then there's shifting the existing system, horizon 2, because we're going to need a banking system. We're going to need consultants who understand these new ways of operating. So the fact that you're joining a bank or a consulting company, to me, is not evidence that you don't understand the transition we're in the midst of. I know several students who are taking these positions exactly because they hope to play some small role in beginning to make them much more purpose-driven, much more conscious. And many conversations I have a student who works for one of the Federal Reserve banks, a former student. And that's quite hard at the moment for all kinds of reasons. But he is there because he thinks it's really important that the banking system of the country be on sound foundations. And, he wants to play a role in that. And I have many conversations with the students about this trade-off. And the other thing I think it's important I'm very aware of is it's scary to be a young person right now. I know many who can't find jobs. And so, if you can find a job, build some skills, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So I appreciate that. But my understanding, having said all that, is entrepreneurship is now not a small thing at the business school. A very large fraction of students are trying to start their own enterprises. And some of them are amazing. There's a young person in my office just 2 days ago talking about building a cell phone that is committed to human flourishing, that is supportive of helping you build relationships to people around you and running a healthy life, and doesn't have a screen and is designed not to be addictive. And, what would that look like? No, this is his vision. I was like, wow. He said, that's what I want to build. And, then we had the conversation about maybe find a few friends and see if anyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
But the impulse to, I'm going to do this. I mean, wow, that is fantastic.
No, I get it. I mean, when I left university, I wanted to go live in the belly of the beast because I figured I knew nothing about business. I'd studied economics at a prestigious English university, and but I didn't really understand business. And there was part of me that felt, well, and people were saying, "Oh, you're selling out," but look, here we are with conscious capitalism 40 years later. So it's a little bit like, you plant the seed and you just don't know how that seed will germinate over time. I apologize, Roz. Jump right in.
Oh. Yeah, and Rebecca, you're teaching your students and all of us really that business can be beautiful. I think I mentioned to you a few days ago that I had students in my MBA class on conscious capitalism crying when we were teaching your case or discussing your case that you wrote on Triodos Bank, Conscious Money in Action. And these students who had worked in banking, they said, I didn't know banking could be so beautiful. And I said, everything can be. And I think that's the kind of seed that you're planting in your students. You can go into banking, you can go into consulting, can be incredible. You can bring about massive shifts in enormous companies in the right direction if you have got that consciousness with which you approach that. So anything can be noble and beautiful and heroic done with the right consciousness. And I think that's the...
exactly.
Yes. Now, we've been around... Conscious capitalism has been around as a movement now for 16 or so years, or maybe 17 years.
18 years.
It's going to be 18 now, sometime this year. Yeah, you're right. If we could accomplish one breakthrough as a movement in the next 3 years, what do you think that should be? What would you advise us?
Oh, I can't have
please,
two.
Give us two.
I want two.
I'm the CEO of Conscious Capitalism. You're allowed two. I'm looking for the coaching.
If you could make the idea that managing with wisdom and compassion is equally as important as managing with strategic brilliance, and that treating people as human beings is not some kind of wishy-washy cop-out, but the way forward. If you could get that really into the water, and of course you don't want to label it ESG or woke or any of these things. We're just talking, I know many Republican business people who manage this way. Deeply, deeply purpose-driven people who are managing their businesses for human flourishing. If you could make that idea not dominant, but visible. And, in my dreams, Timothy, I'm imagining like a sequence of super short videos with longer cases, and not just the CEO going on about how amazing she is, because that's great, but like talking to people on the line. Like, what is it like to work here? And including some of the tension and stress, because I think one of the reasons that message hasn't gotten out as widely as it could have done is there was a temptation to say, and you said it, oh, it's win-win, no problem. Look, this is all beautiful. Any firm I've been in, any place I've been in, it's not all beautiful. There's those difficult moments. There's the tension, the stress. What should we do? It should be an adventure. Show us the adventure of building firms like this and the difference they can make. So that would be amazing.
The adventure of building conscious businesses and enterprises. I love it. That's
cool.
Yeah. No. And it's an adventure and it's hard sometimes, but, and just getting some of the messy complexity, because that's what makes it interesting. And then the other thing is, if you could help persuade some of your colleagues that having a functional democracy is really important.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of that in Minnesota where, they got the 60 CEOs to at least sign a pledge that sort of said, but that's just a small kernel of what we need right now. And
But exactly. And what it would look like, and let me be precise, it means building alliances, because no firm is going to say that on their own. And it would mean I'm guessing it's years of having behind the scenes conversations, building the commitment, bringing people in, and really having very complicated discussions about what kind of democracy and what kind of controls, because most business people, and I understand this, don't want any controls of any kind. But it's a bad idea. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So that would be
Thank you,
amazing.
Rebecca.
What a legacy.
Yeah, we are going to
Yeah.
get you out of here with some rapid fire fun questions. A little more personal as well.
Sure.
So tell us your morning ritual. Is it coffee or tea or yoga or meditation or a jog? How do you get going?
I get up and shower because that makes me nice and warm. And once I'm nice and warm, I stretch and do yoga and go through a kind of move the body. Because I've been talking a lot about discovering, your inner wisdom. Sometimes I think that's actually discovering your body. That we're all so, for years,
yes.
I was completely alienated from my body.
Yeah.
I was a brain on a stick. And so just moving and feeling my body, and that makes me feel good, and it raises, my happiness level. And then I sit in meditation for a while.
No.
And I love it. It was hard to get into the habit, but now that I have it, I see the way in which it makes the rest of my day go so much better.
This will be a tough one for a scholar and academic like you, but what is a book or 1, 2 books or 3 books that deeply shaped your worldview in the beginning or even later on?
There's a very short book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which I think is one of the best spiritual texts ever written. It's not religious. It's funny. It's pragmatic. It's grounded. That's an absolutely foundational book for me. What are the books I really key into? I should have expected this question.
Normally we just ask for one. That's fine. Sometimes people say, I can't give you one. That's fine.
Okay.
Is there a leader, past or present, that you most admire, that you hold up as an exemplary kind of leader?
This is going to be repetitive, but it's the true answer. I've been really trying to understand African American history and its role in the US, because not just Dr. King, but all the other Black leaders, their ability to get out of bed and keep pushing in the face of absolutely overwhelming odds. When if you said, rationally, is it ever going to change? For 300 years, they have been doing this. And so I've been reading people like Howard Thurman, who was Dr. King's favorite theologian. He carried his book everywhere. I've been looking at some of the earlier Black leaders. I've been reading, there's a wonderful new biography of Dr. King by a man called Eng, E-N-G. And, this, it's like many pages, but I take away 2 things. One, he was not perfect. He was doing the best he could, just like all of us. And 2, it wasn't him. There were all those allies and friends and relationships, and it was really like a much bigger thing. And we tend to say, Rosa Parks sat down, Martin Luther King stood up, and we got civil rights. No. This was a lot of fighting and working and showing that you could build love in the face of hate. That's super hard. So right now, he and his colleagues are top of mind for me.
Wow.
Have you had any role?
But I also
Have you had any role models?
No, I also love the female prime ministers. Iceland, New Zealand. I mean, they are such role models for me. And the Wellbeing Economy Forum. Do you guys know the Wellbeing Economy? And they're actually trying to put in place the Prime Minister of Scotland, who's amazing, or was amazing, but she changed. These are political female leaders who are just dynamite. So yes, really important for me too.
Have you had any role models in the world of academia that you've tried to model your career after? Or are you kind of a unique? You're a unicorn.
My thesis
Your
advisor.
thesis advisor, yeah?
Yeah, my thesis advisor. No, I'm not a unicorn. My thesis advisor, Kim Clark. He was Clay Christensen's advisor too. He was the Mormon Bishop of Cambridge. Is
he the former dean of Harvard?
For a long time ran.
Was he the former dean?
He became the dean of Harvard Business School. And he modeled for me wonderful scholarship, total commitment to the people to the morality, to doing what was right. It was super, super foundational to my career.
And is there a place in nature that restores you, that you really go back to?
Oh, I think standing under any mature tree.
Love it.
And looking up through the
remember when we
branches.
were at the Redwoods with that Buddhist monastery a few months ago? Those 2,000-year-old trees.
Yes.
Oh my God. Awe-inspiring.
Awe-inspiring.
Awe-inspiring. And the roots going deep,
Connecting.
and they continue to breathe.
And that's a beautiful metaphor.
Standing on one.
That's a beautiful metaphor, Rebecca, for today's podcast. I think the roots run deep, and we open up to a future that we need to be looking at in terms of the height of those trees and the height of your vision. You've covered an enormous amount of territory, and it's been very inspiring to hear your journey and you talk about it. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, this is beautiful.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I have enormous admiration for the work you're doing. I think it's really important. So please, keep up the good fight.
We will try.
Change
We
the
need
world.
alliances, so we'll come back on that. And thank you to our listeners. And if you enjoyed today's show, then whatever channel you're listening to, please hit the subscribe button. And if you feel so moved, go over to Apple and iTunes and leave us a rating in your comments. We always love to hear from you. And much thanks to Rainbow Production for producing today's show, and to Conscious Capitalism, Inc. for sponsoring our program. We really appreciate that, and we will see you all next week.